what I want to do in this episode is give you a holistic snapshot of what's been going on in that region. So, what I can only call the South Asia Great Game. The first trigger event I want to talk about is the repealing of Article 370 in India. But what a lot of people don't know about is um, there's an LAC, the line of actual control, that is basically the demarcation between China and India. Maybe this was done intentionally. Like I said, that there's a global play here. So India is part of Quad, which basically is an alliance that the US is leading against China to corner them in Taiwan. So the second trigger event that I want to talk about is the assassination of some of these Sikh leaders, the Khalistanis, 6th of May 2023, when Paramjit Singh Panjwar was assassinated in Lahore, Pakistan. The biggest trigger event was what happened in Bangladesh. So the map of India kind of looks like a chicken. There's a little small corridor which is known as the Siliguri corridor, and this is what is referred to as the chicken's neck. Now, this is kind of like 130 kilometers away from that chicken's neck, the Siliguri corridor that I just showed you. Let's say if China and Pakistan in the next year or so were able to build that base, which is kind of sending some shivers down Indian policymakers' spines. Pakistan has its own problems. So, and if you look at all of these trigger events, you will understand why the second round had to happen. If you look at the way the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, has been set up, India talking about taking Pakistan-occupied Kashmir cannot happen unless India wants to take a fight with China. Now, what does Pakistan have to worry about? That, how long can they rely on China? What are the threats to India? Then they're just looking at too many fires to put out. Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Basement Batak. Today is the second part in a three-part series that I've been doing about India and Pakistan, the hot skirmishes that have been going on. If you haven't already watched the previous episode, because in that episode, which was part one, I cover the kinetic action that has taken place, giving you a timeline of the fight that has gone on. So I call them the rounds. So the round number one was in Feb 2019, and round number two was recently in May 2025. And I've been saying that, and a lot of people have been saying, and there's going to be a round three that's going to be upcoming very soon. So what I want to do in this part number two, is I want to give you a little brief and maybe a little deeper look at why exactly we're here. What are the drivers and what are the reasons for India and Pakistan that have brought them to this impasse? And is it just about India and Pakistan, or are there other players involved? So, what I want to do in this episode is give you a holistic snapshot of what's been going on in that region. So, what I can only call the South Asia Great Game. I think there's a lot of geopolitical events that need to be highlighted. If you understand these little fires that have popped up in South Asia, you'll be able to understand why we got into a second round and why a third round is coming sometime soon. So, what I'll do in this section is I'm going to try and give you a little brief, hopefully quickly, of these major events that have happened and how they tie into, let's say, the threat perception, or the goals that India and Pakistan have set for themselves. The first trigger event I want to talk about is the repealing of Article 370 in India around August 2019. Okay, so this was just a few months after the first round that we had of kinetic action in Feb 2019. And what India did was, as per Article 370, Kashmir has a special status in India, which basically makes it a self-governing territory. Okay, so it has Indian army in there, but it's recognized as the contested territory. Okay, so what India did was it repealed 370 and then made Kashmir a part of mainland India. Okay, so now Indian elections covers now the Kashmiri territory, for example. But it wasn't just the Indian occupied Kashmir that got impacted by this. So if you look at this map over here, this is how Kashmir stands on the ground today. Okay, so uh, one part of Kashmir, which is the green section that you see here, is what is controlled by the Pakistanis. Okay, so Gilgit-Baltistan and then Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is to the west of Jammu and Kashmir. controlled by India. So that green section is controlled by Pakistan. The cream section is controlled by India, and then there's a red section that which is controlled by China. Okay, so again, after repealing 370, what India is saying that all of this, the green, the cream, and the red, is all theirs. The orange. There's a couple of things I want you to notice here. Okay, so everyone knows about uh, the border that's between India and Pakistan. So it's kind of like a de facto border in the Kashmir region between India and Pakistan. It's called the LOC, or the line of control. Okay, but what a lot of people don't know about is um, there's an LAC, the line of actual control, that is basically the demarcation between China and India. So, and it doesn't just go over here. There are three sectors here. So there's a western sector, which is pretty much the Jammu and Kashmir area. Then there's the middle one, which is colored here in orange, and then there's the blue one on the east side. Okay, so I'll come back to that a little later. So what India, after repealing 370, has done is that they're claiming that this entire territory. So what this has done, either wittingly or unwittingly, is that it has brought China into the game now. Okay, so maybe this was done intentionally. Like I said, that there's a global play here. So India is part of Quad, which basically is an alliance that the U.S. is leading against China to corner them in Taiwan. If this is being done on the insistence of the Americans, then what is happening here is that India is basically picking up a fight with China with kind of some kind of agreement with the Americans that we will engage them here, keep them distracted on this side. In 2020, the Chinese actually ingressed inside the Ladakh region. Okay, so now the Chinese still claim that they're still in there, at least 4 kilometers in. They had, I think, moved in 20 kilometers, but then they were through some agreement they moved back. India says that they've entirely moved back. China says that no, they're still inside bits of Ladakh. So what basically China says is that they were never accepted that either. So they want to take probably all of Ladakh. I don't know. We'll find out. But clearly, India wants all of it back. Okay, so you keep on hearing Modi saying that the only discussion we'll have with Pakistan, and he wants to focus this on Pakistan only. So the second trigger event that I want to talk about is the assassination of some of these Sikh leaders, the Khalistanis, that started in 2023. Now, back-to-back assassinations. The very first one happened actually in Pakistan. This was on the 6th of May 2023 when Paramjit Singh Panjwar was assassinated in Lahore, Pakistan. This had happened at the same time when Brampton's in Canada, Brampton's mayor was visiting Pakistan. So while he was in Pakistan, Paramjit Singh Panjwar was assassinated. Okay, so there was a big statement made at the time. Not many people were able to piece things together. But what happened as a second event was almost a month later, on the 18th of June 2023, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was assassinated in Vancouver, Canada. Okay, so this took a lot of the media's attention because this happened inside Canada. Justin Trudeau came on screen and he talked about this. Indian diplomats were held guilty on this, and then they were kicked out of Canada. A full diplomatic crisis ensued between Canada and India. And this is then when people started linking this with what had happened in Pakistan. That was no coincidence, but this was something, this was kind of like a pattern was emerging. Okay. And then what happened a little later in 2023, not that India cared about this, was on the 29th of November 2023, Gurpatwant Singh Panoon, who's a very well-known Khalistani, there was an attempt made to assassinate him, which was foiled by the U.S. CIA was involved in that busting ring, and that kind of confirmed. And that's when the Five Eye Nations, which includes the U.S., the U.K., New Zealand, Australia, Canada, these countries kind of got together and they were like, okay, this is going out of hand. Um, Something needs to be done here. So, and this is where Modi's whole assertive action under what Ajit Doval calls, the offensive defense doctrine, started kind of blowing back. The very last trigger event I want to talk about, and there are many more. There's Maldives, and there's many others. The Americans pull out from Afghanistan in 2021. I'm just going to leave those because for brevity's sake. But I think the biggest trigger event was what happened in Bangladesh. So uh, the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government there was a big event. Okay, so and it's not just that the government there fell, but the fact that the entire Awami League was kicked out of very recently, was been banned inside Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina had to flee to India, and I think she's still there. Um, and for if you look at this from a very, let's say, geopolitical perspective, this is a big loss to India. Okay, so why is it such a key state for them? So if you look at and then before I come to the chicken's neck, I just want you to see this diagram, which is basically a chicken superimposed on India. Okay, so the map of India kind of looks like a chicken. Okay, and you see this exactly why. So Eastern India, which consists of the seven sister states, is seen as the head of the chicken, and then the mainland India is seen as the body of the chicken. So if you zoom into the map of India, specifically where it borders with Bangladesh, what you will see is Bangladesh is kind of like in the middle of two blocks of Indian territory. Okay, so there's one which is the mainland India, okay, which is basically the body of the chicken, and then the head of the chicken is to Bangladesh's right, bordering with Myanmar, and that's where the seven sister states are. Okay, so there's a little small corridor which is known as the Siliguri corridor, and this is what is referred to as the chicken's neck. So that chicken's neck is sandwiched between northern Bangladesh and Nepal. Or Bangladesh is kind of broken up into these divisions. Okay, these I think there are seven divisions, and the most northern one is the Rangpur division. And inside Rangpur, there are different divisions. One of them is the Lal Monirhat division. Now, this is kind of like 130 kilometers away from that chicken's neck, the Siliguri corridor that I just showed you. And this piece of land, Lal Munir Hut, is kind of like what's taking all the headlines these days because uh, there's a base being built, an air base. Actually, there was already an air base here from the World War II era that now China and Pakistan seem to be uh, rebuilding, which is kind of sending some shivers down Indian policymakers' spines. Okay, so that's why Bangladesh is key for India. So as we talk about these restive regions, there's maybe it's a good segue into our next section, which is the subcontinental wars. So as you can see that there are these restive regions inside India. There's the western one, which has to do with Khalistanis. There's a northern one in Kashmir, and then this, which I say is the big one, uh, is basically the Bangladesh problem. Okay, so these are the little subconventional warfare that has been going on since the last few years. And if you look at Pakistan, then in Pakistan you will see that Pakistan has its own problems. So on the western side of Pakistan, you will see Balochistan is seeing a lot of subconventional warfare in the form of Balochistan Liberation Army. Now, there are many other groups that go along with BLA. There's BLF and there's BYC and what have you. I won't get into those details, but uh, Pakistan claims, with a lot of evidence too, I might add, that the insurgency in Balochistan is being sponsored by India. Okay, so and again, India makes the same claim about Kashmiri separatists or Khalistanis being funded by and supported by the Pakistanis, and now even in the case of Bangladesh. And if you look at all of these trigger events, you will understand why the second round had to happen. I think it's when Bangladesh fell out of India's hands, is when they saw that, okay, now we just can't sit on our hands anymore. We got to take charge and start pushing back before, let's say, if China and Pakistan in the next year or so were able to build that base and establish their, let's say, one squadron of J-10C and one squadron of J-35 sits on that corridor, then it's very easy. A 22-kilometer Siliguri corridor, and that's the chicken's neck that I talked about, can be choked off, and then the entire seven sister states, you've kind of lost them. Just one last point I want to make about this, the geopolitical context that I've given you is that there are a few threats that both India and Pakistan needs to keep in mind. If you look at the way the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, has been set up, it kind of stretches all the way from Gilgit-Baltistan through, we're very adjacent to Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I think Ahmedabad is the station that comes closest to the CPEC on that side, and then going all the way down to Balochistan. Okay, so um, it's the key point for China to keep, their the supply lines open to Pakistan. So, India talking about taking Pakistan occupied Kashmir cannot happen unless India wants to take a fight with China. And that's why China is going to back Pakistan to the hilt uh, on this conflict. Now, what does Pakistan have to worry about? The biggest thing with this they need to worry about is when that Taiwan and if that war starts, when China makes its move into Taiwan and then Taiwan, for whatever reason, doesn't want to make this a smooth transition and they plan to take this into a kinetic war with China. Then comes in the US, then comes in the Quad to ratchet up the pressure on China. So, and it'll come in a lot of in waves, just like what you had seen in Ukraine, right? So the Russians have been bogged down there for the last 4 years. Ukraine, on paper, should not have survived for 4 years, but because that they've been getting backing from the U.S. not recently, but with from Europe, they've been able to keep fighting on. Okay, so similarly, the plan would be to keep China engaged through proxies and to keep them, to kind of drain their economy and to drain their resources in this long fight with Taiwan. So if that happens, and if that war stretches, if for whatever reason China is unable to uh, take a complete hold of Taiwan in, let's say, a year time max, and it stretches into 3-4 years, then what does China do? Because now China might start feeling some kind of stress, a consideration that Pakistan needs to keep in mind. That how long can they rely on China to get them out of a situation and keep their supply lines open against India. The second threat that Pakistan needs to be cognizant of is their economic projects inside Balochistan specifically. Okay, so there's the Reko Diq project, which is people estimate anywhere between 300 billion to 1 trillion worth of minerals in just from that one project. And then there's Tajikistan water that's coming. It's a big project that's going to take Tajikistan's water, bring it all the way down to Balochistan, so that Balochistan, which right now is an arid land, can become an agricultural land. And there are many other projects that are being planned inside Balochistan, and which is why you're seeing the subcontinental fight in Balochistan. So right now, Balochistan is the most underdeveloped of all provinces in Pakistan. But the more underdeveloped you are, the more chances of and the fastest growth will be seen from from this province. What are the threats to India? Pretty much in the same vein, if Quad, for whatever reason, gets very occupied and they start seeing that, what, we can't take on China. China is too strong for us and they are just too way ahead of us now. And it could be the case where they might even pull the plug on even wanting to take on China and Taiwan. If they back out, then what does India do? Because now India was banking on the US's support and the Quad support in taking on these little conflicts that are happening. So, once the Americans step back, it'll be very hard for India to keep this war going and fighting it on two fronts. Well, at least two fronts. So, if you look at in Pakistan and in China, there are two fronts. Then, if you look at Bangladesh, that's the third front. And then, if the Khalistan movement, or like let's say the Kashmiri movement, really gets fired up, then they're just looking at too many fires to put out. So I hope this episode gives you a little bit more of an appreciation for what's going on and why it's going on. It'll give you a good understanding, even if you're not from the region, of the complexities of this entire conflict and why this will only get worse from this point on. There are many other issues that I haven't touched on. One of them being water sources, and with the Indus Water Treaty and the Indus Water Treaty, how that gets affected, and how that plays into the calculus of Pakistan. All of this I don't want to discuss. There's a lot to discuss here, but hopefully this episode will give you a good understanding and appreciation of the complexities of this conflict and why you need to keep your eyes peeled for round number 3. So in the next episode, I will be talking about that round 3 and what I feel and that again will be very heavy on the kinetics. So subscribe to the channel and watch out for that next episode. So till then, cheers.